watching for 10 minutes in silence. My name is Wild Trees. I am a biologist, so I study life. And, life, really the smallest unit of life can be thought of as a single cell, like a, skin cell or a muscle cell. You and I are made of trillions of tiny individual cells. Each one of them is alive. So you could actually get a little cotton swab and swab the inside of your mouth and look at that under a microscope, and that cell is alive. And you can keep it alive as a pet, and that's you. You can keep yourself as a pet, basically. And there's smaller units of biology, like you could look at DNA. But really, I think one cell is basically what is considered the smallest unit of life. And then right now, the largest unit of life to study is basically the whole planet, because the planet is full of life. It's a large biosphere. And so the scale of biology is from a tiny cell that's microscopic all the way to the planet. Now, I suspect that life will be found on other planets, and it'll be found on other galaxies and solar systems. So I suspect the scale of biology will be from the tiny cell all the way up to the solar system, up to different galaxies. I have a degree in biology. And I think I said that already. So I mainly study invertebrates. So invertebrates are animals that don't have any bones. There's a lot of reasons I like to study invertebrates. The popular thinking right now is that invertebrate animals like insects, crustaceans, sea sponges, stuff like that, is that they can't feel pain. That may change in the future, but if that's true, then I enjoy that aspect, because I certainly don't want to cause any suffering to any animals. Also, some other reasons why I like invertebrates is because they're small. They're easy. You could catch a bunch of them easily, as opposed to like a bird or something. If you were going to study a bird or an elephant, I mean, they're pretty large, and there's a lot of work to capture one. So the invertebrates I usually study are insects. There's one insect called the whirligig beetle, which is a tiny water insect. And I also study tardigrades, which are microscopic animals. They're actually very unique. There's really no other animal like a tardigrade. They're also known as water bears. So, for instance, tardigrades, they're not insects. They're not spiders. They're not bacteria. Tardigrades are tardigrades. They are their own phylum. So they're their own group of animal. But I like to study them. I also like teaching. I taught at a university for 2 years, and I helped write one of the textbooks. It's still being used today by hundreds of students, so that's nice. I like giving guided hikes through forests, through the woods, with the National Park Service. I like giving lectures at conferences, scientific conferences, but I also like to go give talks at high schools and middle schools, and even elementary schools recently. I have been published in a scientific journal. So this is really how science gets spread throughout the world. So what happens is a scientist will conduct an experiment, and then they will get all their data, they'll analyze everything, they'll write a formal paper, and then they'll submit that paper to one of these scientific journals. And then in that journal, they will that paper will be reviewed by other scientists who are on the editorial board. They will give you feedback, and they'll decide whether it should be published or it shouldn't be published. And once it is published, then that's accessible to anybody in the world. So anybody can read it, and now the world knows about whatever discovery you've made. I am also a field biologist. So what that means is that I spend half of my time in the laboratory analyzing these insects in a microscope, but the other half of the time I am actually looking for them and catching them. And so the research that I've done has been all over Texas, Alaska, Colorado, and Western Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Arkansas. Also, right after I got my bachelor's degree, I actually spent a year as an animal trapper. So during that year, I became very skilled at catching squirrels, skunks, raccoons, snakes, armadillos, nutria, beavers, possums, rats. And I've also worked with hornets, wasps, bees, and bats. This is an important aspect for the paranormal, because one of the branches of the paranormal is cryptozoology. And cryptozoology basically literally means the study of hidden animals. So these are animals that are hidden because we haven't discovered them, and so they need to be found. And trapping is a really good way to find animals. So I'm talking about Bigfoot, skunk apes, giant birds, mothmen, mothwomen, lake monsters. So that experience, I think, helps me with the aspect of cryptozoology. Okay, so I'm going to take a break and read some of the comments to make sure I haven't messed anything up. 1 second. Let's see. All right. So, okay, Angel Wings. I do engage with the audience. This is what I'm doing right now. So, yes, Angel Wings. Thank you for lip reading. And Angel Wings sings, I would still think they'd feel it in a different way, maybe through energies. Yeah, you know, you're very right. I think this is referring to whether insects and invertebrates can feel pain or not. I think, you know, I think what I could say is that currently scientists believe they can't feel pain the traditional way, but in the future we may very well learn that that is not true. And then Terry, thank you for being able to hear me. But yeah, every now and then I have like a 7-page script, but every now and then I will pause to read comments. Okay, so, before we get started, I also want to talk about science. So what does science mean, basically? Well, there's really two things you need to understand about science in order for you to practice it or to evaluate claims, whether they're scientifically. And, you know, I really don't have anything against someone who's anti-science or who has negative feelings towards science, because science is imperfect and people could use science to do bad things. But, you know, science in itself is pure by itself. It's not negative or positive. It's simply a tool that we use to understand the world better. And that tool can be used for bad things, and it can be used for good things, just like a hammer. You know, you could use a hammer to build a house. You could also use it to, you know, break someone's house down if you don't like it. So it's not really the hammer's fault. But like I said, I don't mind if people don't like science, if they have a bone to pick with science. But what I do have a problem with is if you don't understand what science is. So I would like people to understand what it is. And then once they understand it, hey, go buck wild. You can hate it all you want to. So in order for science to work, you need two things. Number one is you need repeatability. So that means that when you come up with a discovery, you know, you publish it in the scientific paper, or you make a claim about a new drug, or you say you have an engine that can run on water, you need to have repeatability. So that means that someone else has to be able to follow your directions and get the same results. And I think this is a good thing. I don't think that's bad at all. Let's say that you go out to your car and your car only starts like 1 out of 30 times. And the other times it just doesn't start and you can't go to work. You can't go to the store. You can't go to your concert. Well, that's bad. You know, you want to have repeatability. So that's the first thing you need in science. In science, you need to have repeatability with your claims. Number two, you need to have this concept called falsifiability. Falsifiability is the capacity for something, a statement, to be proven wrong. So that means you have to be able to prove someone wrong, not to prove them correct. So that could be a little confusing. So basically, let's say, here's a classic example. I think Dr. Carl Sagan used this as one of his books. So basically, he said that your friend invites you over to his house and he says, hey, I have a dragon living in my garage. And so you say, great, I'll be right over. And you say, I'm going to use science to find out if this is a scientific claim. So you get there, you're like, show me the dragon. Your friend says, hey, this dragon's invisible. You can't see it. So you're like, okay, well, I can't prove you wrong by saying that I can't see it because you're saying it's invisible. You're like, that's fine. I get it. Sometimes things are weird. You say, okay, how about we throw a blanket over it? And then when the blanket's over it, you should be able to see the outline of the dragon. And then your friend says, Well, that also won't work, because as soon as you throw the blanket over it, it'll phase out of this reality. It'll go to another reality. So you're like, okay, I can't prove you wrong there either. You say, okay, what if we put some flour on the ground, and then when it steps on the ground, I should be able to see its footprints? Well, your friend says, well, you can't do that because it hovers over the ground. So I think you guys are seeing the point. This is a claim that lacks falsifiability. You're not going to be able to prove them wrong. And that is something that makes that claim unscientific. It makes it a pseudoscience. Pseudoscience means it's false science. And so these are the two questions you should ask when you hear a claim. You know, somebody tells you something extraordinary or maybe not extraordinary. You should ask yourself, can I repeat this claim? And number two, can I prove this claim wrong? It takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, then you're good to go as far as science. Okay. The other thing is that during this show, I will talk I'll give a lot of facts, and a lot of these facts, or most of them, they're not my own facts. So I actually, use resources like NASA's website or National Geographic or Wikipedia. And so in the description of this video, you'll be able to see all the links to where I got this information, so you could check it out and read it for yourself. In science, it's very important to give credit to where you get your information from. You could avoid plagiarism. So once again, I don't want, a lot of these statements are not my own statements. I did not do the work, and I am giving credit for those statements. So yeah, so that's a background on me, just for the people that don't know about me, people that are watching the show for the first time. But I want to talk about the show, what I want to do with the show, basically. So I do want to definitely have a lot of interaction with people. So if you hang tight, obviously it's my first time doing a live stream, but I will stop every now and then and check comments, and I definitely want to respond. You could ask me a question at any time. I'll be taking breaks to answer. Right now I have like 9 pages of notes for today's show. But yeah, I do want to have interactions. I was thinking about maybe reading off this encyclopedia. Maybe this is something you guys would enjoy, like on a second show, like a Thursday show. But there's this encyclopedia I have called, it's called Man, Myth, and Magic. It was written in the 70s. It was written by academics, and it basically covers everything in the paranormal. And it's very awesome. Like, it's got all these, it's like A to Z on the paranormal. And it's got, like, I don't know, like all these really cool illustrations. And I don't know, I thought I could just read from the beginning, from A all the way to Z. I mean, not all at once, but maybe like in different spurts. And then, give my feedback on it. And because I would love to read this thing on my own, because, man, it would be an education to read an entire encyclopedia. But yeah, so that's something. If you guys think that's a good idea, you can let me know. I also have active research projects I'm doing. So these are projects that I'm on the stage where I've collected the animals, these water bears and these water beetles. Now I'm just analyzing them with a microscope. So I could hook up a camera to the microscope and just walk you through all my research. I think that would encourage me to do more work and get these projects done. And you can look at some cool stuff under the microscope. So if you guys like those ideas, let me know. If you don't like them, let me know. Or if you have your own ideas, let me know. I will also be doing interviews. So next week, I already have someone lined up. We'll be talking about UFOs in Texas, which is where I live. But also I want to, I also want to help people who are suffering with the paranormal. I do believe people suffer from the paranormal. So I definitely want to help people. And this is where I'll talk about, I'm coming from a show called Black Lotus Live, which I recommend you check. It's a channel called Black Lotus Productions. And I did that show for about 1.5 years. And if you look in the playlist of this channel, you could see all the episodes that I'm in. I'm a little vain. I just put the episodes I'm in. I'm in most of them. I'm in like 77 of them. But Damien, who's I'm sure is watching, Damien was the host of that show. And he always said that he started the show to help people, make them feel like they're not alone, make them feel listened to if they're having paranormal problems. And that's definitely what I want to do. I definitely want to help people, because I definitely think that one of the consequences of the paranormal is human suffering. Okay, so let me go check on the comments once again. I'm going to stop my camera because I'll look like an idiot if I'm like squinting at my tiny screen. But let's see what everybody's saying. All right, here I go. Let's see. Let's see. Well, Frapsap, thank you, Frapsap, for being here. He says 95% humbug. And he says, I remember that one. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure what you're referring to. But go ahead and try to educate me, Frapsap. And thank you for being here. Abdul Al-Hazred. Key me in. I'd like to know what's going on there. And then Stephanie Quick, thank you so much for microscope water bears would be epic. Yeah, I mean, thank you. Water bears are very cool. Water bears live all over the world. They actually live on every continent. So wherever you guys are at, I'm sure there's water bears all around you right now. You could go get some. And Terry says, it's all good. Anyway, Frapsap, let me know what's up with this thing. And then here we go. You should do a show on the Japanese suicide forward. Why are people drawn there? Why are there no animal sounds? Oh, that's very true. Yeah, I suspect it's a cultural reason, tradition, a morbid cultural tradition. But thank you for that. I will definitely look into that. Okay, so go ahead and leave your comments. I'm going to continue with the show. Thank you once again, everybody. And thank you for the people that watched for 10 minutes. Okay. So let's get into the paranormal. That was like a background. Basically, this is what my idea on the paranormal is. You know, the paranormal is a large subject. It encompasses like psychic abilities. It encompasses cryptids, alien abductions, black-eyed children. It goes on and on and on. Time slips. Overall, you know, I'm very open-minded on the paranormal. I honestly don't think there's enough evidence to support either one, either possibility. So I'm open to the idea that none of this paranormal stuff is real, but I'm also open to the idea that all of it is real. I really think that the evidence is lacking, the physical evidence, and I think perhaps the reason why it's lacking is because it's being the best evidence is being suppressed. I mean, this is going into conspiracy theories, but conspiracies do happen. I mean, the definition of a conspiracy is just more than one person getting together and planning something. There's a conspiracy. You could make a conspiracy for a surprise birthday party. But it is possible that governments or institutions with power have been suppressing the very best physical evidence. And by physical evidence, I mean photographs, I mean objects, I mean bodies, videos, pictures, diaries. But right now, you know, obviously there's not enough physical evidence, because if there was enough physical evidence, then it would be an open and shut case. We would know that all these paranormal things are real. But like I said, I think this is a good position for a scientist to be. I am 100% open-minded. Every crazy thing I hear, I give it the benefit of the doubt. I think about it whether it's true, and I think about it whether it's not true, and I try to get the most information out of it. Now, what is really real, here's the thing. This is what's really real about the paranormal. What is undoubtedly real about the paranormal is that people are telling these stories, okay? People are sharing stories of weird things that happened to them. Those stories are real. And even if none of those stories are real, I mean, if none of them are true, I mean, the stories are real because they exist. You literally hear somebody, it's a story, it happened, somebody told you that story. But if there's no truth behind the story, it's still interesting. Why are people telling these stories? This is part of our human culture. And these stories have been going on, I suspect, since the beginning of humanity. So just the fact that the stories are there, as far as folklore, modern myth, and modern legend, that is interesting, and that is worth studying to me. The other thing I think about paranormal encounters is that I think that they are rare. I don't think they're that common as a whole, or they're rarely reported. In other words, maybe they happen a lot, but the people that experience them don't talk about them a lot. Or another possibility is that they're rarely remembered. Perhaps all of us are having paranormal encounters or experiences, but we just don't remember them. And so we can't tell those stories or talk about them. So that's basically a summary on what I think about the paranormal. Now we'll talk about the subject, which is UFOs and alien abductions. But before that, I will read some comments. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Perhaps App says he's a water bear and he wants to be studied. And he says, haha, JK, I think you are a water bear, Frap Sap. What kind of water bear are you? Are you asexual? Are you sexual? I mean, some water bears actually reproduce asexually, which is very interesting. And I think it's more true that people don't remember them, is what Terry says. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That could very well be true. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, Fratsap. And thank you for our 7 viewers. Great. Okay, so UFOs. What do I think about UFOs? Well, I think there's many explanations for UFOs. One explanation, let me list a couple of explanations for what's causing UFOs. Unidentified flying objects. Number one, I think it's the military fucking with us. If you listen to the Joe Rogan interview, which is the link is in the description, he interviewed Commander David Fravor, and he was talking about the Nimitz encounter off the coast of California. And it's a very good interview, but he specifically says he uses high-powered military aircraft to purposefully, just for fun, basically hoax a UFO encounter to civilians. He admits it. That's probably not a crime, otherwise he wouldn't have said it. But yeah, I think the military has toys that are advanced, and I think humans are humans, and I think a lot of these, I think sometimes the military just fucks with us. And that's part of it. So I think some of them are military craft. Of course, that does not explain the encounters that have happened before we had airplanes. But some of the modern ones are, I think, the military messing with us. Another thing I think is weather phenomenon. I mean, we're going to start talking about the atmosphere and the weather and a little bit later, but there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in the sky. And, our eyes are not that good. I'm sorry. Look at an eagle's eye compared to a human. We don't have that great of eyes. That's not to say people that even have astigmatism. Some people have worse eyes. So I think some weather phenomenon, like weird clouds, could be some UFOs. I also think a lot of them could be just regular junk, like satellites, balloons, birds, optical illusions, planets, and stars. I don't mean to say planets and stars are junk. Certainly we need them. But yeah, just a lot of random stuff could be causing UFO sightings. However, I do think the minority of them are extraordinary. That means I think the minority, not the most of them, but a very small amount of them are extraordinary. And I think they may be caused by human minds and emotions, some of them. So I think one other explanation could be that, there's this idea that the human mind is very powerful and that it could create physical matter out of nothingness. And especially with heavy emotions like anger or lust. So, there's this phenomenon called aports or apports. And it's people basically manifesting physical objects like pennies or rain or even gems or money out of nothing. So I think it's possible some people may involuntarily be creating UFO crafts in the sky. And then the other one, which is what I think most people in this hobby really think or would like to believe UFOs are that they're caused by they are non-human origin craft. So they believe that UFOs are actually, wherever they come from, it's not from humans. And the other explanation, which I'm going to talk about because I'm a biologist, is that I think some of these UFOs may be living organisms. I think they may be like some kind of like sky amoeba, sky jellyfish. And I'll get more into detail about why I think that could be. But a scientist who talked about this, a biologist, was Ivan T. Sanderson. He wrote several books on UFOs, and he gives the explanation that some of these could be just animals that we haven't discovered that live in the sky. I mean, think about the ocean. We do have jellyfish, we have whales, we have all these large animals. And in a lot of ways, the ocean is more accessible to humans than the sky. I mean, because anybody can just like jump into the ocean and start swimming around, but nobody can just jump into the sky and start swimming or flying around. At least not most people. So anyway, as you continue, let me go ahead and let me pause and check out these comments. Okay, let's see. Terry says, Oh yeah, Terry says that. Oh, that's the same thing from earlier. Thank you, Terry. And Frapsap says he's the alpha water bear. Well, thank you, Frapsap. That's really good. That's really nice of you. And I am the Sigma water bear, if you're an alpha. Okay. Okay, so here's some advice I have for UFOs, basically. Oh wait, here's something else from Frapsap. You're making me hungry with the menu. Thank you, Frapsap, cracking me up. Okay. This is like a joke, but also this is true advice I have for UFOs, basically. Okay. Here's my advice if anybody sees a UFO, whether it's in the sky or they see it on the ground, especially if it's landed on the ground. Those are especially problematic, I'll say that. Okay, so if you see a UFO, this is what I would do. I would look at it, I would appreciate it. I would then turn around and not approach it at all. But, however, I have heard so many accounts that the legitimate UFOs, not the ones I talked about that are like space junk or the military, but I have heard that a lot of legitimate UFOs are telepathic and they can listen to you. I'll tell you a story about that I heard about it. So here's what I would do. You see a landed UFO, you see one in the sky. Turn around, go home. But before you do that, or while you're doing that, you should think this thought. You could say it out loud, but you just have to think it. You could say, wow, that's a beautiful UFO. It's amazing. I love it. I have so much respect for it. And I bet whoever's inside it, or whoever engineered it, whoever's controlling it is good looking, intelligent, deserves all my respect. And furthermore, I think it would be great if in the morning when I woke up, there was just like, you know, a million crisp $100 bills that are unregistered, untraceable, or just a bunch of gold. I mean, I think that'd be great if somebody wanted to do that, and then just go on your merry way. That's my advice. Do not approach a UFO. Do not do it. A lot of people regret it, and some people have gotten hurt from doing that as well. So the story is that that I have about the UFO encounter was that I was in Facebook, and I was just in some group, in some random paranormal group. Somebody just said, hey, has anybody ever seen an alien? And I said I had, because I have seen one. Whether it's a dream or not, I don't know. But I said I've seen an alien. And I talked about how they were grays. And then somebody private messaged me. And then that person was like, hey, I want to tell you what happened to me. And I think you won't judge me. I want to get it off my chest. And I said, yeah, man, totally. Tell me what happened to you. I won't judge you. I told him I was a scientist. So, you know, this individual was, I think, in her 20s. They were an African-American individual. And they were studying to be they were in college. They were studying to be a dentist. And this happened to them maybe like 5 years ago. They were like 14 or 15 when it happened to them. This is what this individual said. He said when he was a kid, he was very cocky. He was just like really full of himself. So he said he saw this UFO in the sky, and then he started yelling insults at it. I don't know why, but he did the opposite of what I tell you should do. So he started yelling rude things to this UFO. He said later that night, he was in his bed sleeping. He woke up, and there were like 3 really ugly reptilian / gray looking aliens in his room. He said one of them was like crawling on the wall or walking on the wall, defying gravity. He said he was paralyzed. He said they were trying to communicate with him telepathically. He wasn't sure what they were saying, but he got the distinct impression that their feelings were hurt and that they were angry about the insults he said to them. And he said afterwards that he changed his attitude and that he was a more humble person. Now, I know that sounds like a very human characteristics, but if some of these UFOs are piloted by non-humans, I believe they may have human characteristics, or we have their characteristics. So anyway, that's why I say always be nice to your resident UFO. Always say the best things you can to them. Let's see what our comments are talking about. Let's see. I would melt me some butter. $100 million would be helpful. Hell yeah. And then Ayu Walks, thank you for being here. I see you. Well, I see you too. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much. Like I said, You have a bad first episode, that means you're going to have an awesome live streaming career. That's what it means. I'll have to cut the first 10 minutes of this episode out, but whatever. Okay. Here's another explanation I've been thinking about UFOs. And I'm suspecting this is something that may be causing UFOs. So if you go to the channel Think Anomalous on YouTube, super good channel. They make documentaries on the paranormal. They just had one on the jinn, which is a Muslim form of paranormal entity, which is probably the same. It's probably the Muslim world's version of the Greys or the fairies. But toward the end of that video, you know, the writer, the narrator, says that he suspects some of these jinn are created by plasma. Plasma. What is plasma? Well, plasma, it comes from the ancient Greek. This information is from Wikipedia. And it's called, in Greek, it's called moldable substance. Moldable substance sounds like clay. Okay, so what is plasma? Plasma is one of the 4 fundamental states of matter. It contains a significant portion of charged particles, which are ions. What is an ion? Ion is an atom or a molecule with a net electric charge due to a loss or gain of 1 or more electrons. So an electron is basically one of the 3 things that are in atoms. So atoms have electrons, they have protons and neutrons. So an ion is one of these atoms. And so what are atoms also? Well, atoms are basically the periodic element of the periodic table of elements. Those are atoms. So there's like copper is an atom, carbon, oxygen, uranium, titanium, my boy tungsten. I love tungsten, by the way. I'll talk about tungsten at some other point. But an ion is basically one of these atoms that has an electrical charge because they lost or gained an additional one of these subatomic particles. So once again, plasma is the 4th state of matter. It has a lot of these charged particles. The presence of these charged particles is what primarily sets plasma apart from the other fundamental states of matter. It is the most abundant form of matter in the universe. It's mostly associated with stars and the sun. It could be artificially generated by heating a neutral gas or subjecting a neutral gas to an electromagnetic field. So one of the places where you can see plasma is in neon lights, and I believe that is what's happening. The presence of charged particles makes plasma electrically conductive, with the dynamics of the individual particles and macroscopic plasma motion governed by collective electromagnetic fields, and is very sensitive to externally applied fields. Man, that's a mouthful, and I kind of stumbled over it. So basically, this is a state of matter that is very exotic. Well, maybe exotic is not the right word because it's the most common state of matter in the world, but I guess it's exotic in its properties. You know, most matter isn't, most matter that we encounter isn't plasma. Like I myself am made of matter. The screen you're looking at is made of matter. It is not plasma. It doesn't have these properties. So it says that, the response of plasma to electromagnetic fields is used in many modern technology, such as plasma televisions. And so basically, plasma is a very weird state of matter. And I believe that perhaps some UFOs, another explanation, could be caused by plasma. They could be made of plasma. Plasma is also found in lightning. Also, and this is from the Think Anomalous video, perhaps ghosts or ghostly apparitions are made of plasma. And perhaps other paranormal phenomenon are, basically made of plasma. Let's go look at the comments real fast. Looks like we got some long ones. Okay, let's see. Here we go. So Iowax, you see everything, it all breaks down in front of you. The essence, the air itself, a complex design. Pulled into the void, you gain momentum, life forward, only slowly to what seems a lone star. Well, that's very poetic. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, The universe is very complex. I mean, there's so much stuff going on around us, so many little rules going on, so many little things interacting with each other. All right. So moving on to UFOs. So those were some explanations of what possibly could be UFOs. I am gonna probably talk more about the juicy explanations. I'm not gonna spend all my time talking about birds and satellites and balloons. But yeah, here's the thing. Like I said, why don't we know that UFOs are, commonplace? Why don't we accept that UFOs are commonplace? Well, I think it's because we lack the physical evidence. Why do we lack the physical evidence? Well, number one, I think perhaps the government has the physical evidence. They have the expensive tools, the telescopes, the radar, the sonar, the cameras, the LiDAR. They have all these expensive things that you and I don't have. So that's why it's a small group of people that could afford to get the evidence of UFOs. Another reason why it's hard to get proof of UFOs is because they're in the sky. And the sky is hard to reach. Like I said, I mean, we can't just go into the sky and start poking our head around. They're also very fast. I mean, UFOs, a lot of them are very quick flyers. They're not slow, although some of them are, but a lot of them are fast. Now, the number one way we would get proof of UFOs is through photographs. And some good photographs do exist. A lot of frauds exist, but some good photographs exist. But it is difficult to get photographs of a UFO. And a photograph would be the most accessible and easiest way to get evidence of UFO. So why is it difficult? Well, number one, I think a lot of the cameras we have today are digital cameras. So that means that's a camera that comes with your phone. And I honestly recommend film cameras, old school film camera, instead of your digital camera for a number of reasons, which I'll get into. I also recommend a zoom lens because, UFOs are far away from you. If you ever try you see the moon and you think it's beautiful, you ever try taking a picture of it, man, it comes out like crap because you don't have a zoom lens. Zoom lenses are kind of hard to handle. You have to have a steady hand. But there are stabilizers for zoom lenses. Once again, zoom lenses are expensive, but they're not inaccessibly expensive. So yeah, I recommend a film camera with a zoom lens. Why? Because a film camera has more data. It has more information in the film than does most digital cameras. I mean, I think perhaps the most high-end digital cameras probably have comparable data or information in the photo than film camera. But I mean, film camera is so cheap. The film is so cheap. So film is better because it has more information, and we're trying to prove something. We need all the information we can get. So film has a higher dynamic range. So it's better at capturing whites and blacks, and it has details that cannot be replicated in a digital camera. Film is also more forgiving of minor focusing issues and exposure problems. Exposure problems would be how much light is getting into the camera, which is very important. Focusing, of course, is whether something is blurry or clearly visible. Film captures a higher resolution than most digital cameras. And analog film, or like I said, old school film, it could be pushed to multiple stops. So what that means is that basically it refers to your ISO. So your ISO is your camera's sensitivity to light. So once again, in photography, lighting is very important. Like if you want to take really good pictures of your items that you're going to sell or just pictures of somebody, it's really good to go outside because you want to have your natural light. That's really good. And also, if it's cloudy or overcast, that's also very good because you don't have too much harsh lights. But of course, if you want to have an awesome UFO picture, you want to have the light just right. And basically, if you have analog old school film, it is better at catching. It's more sensitive to the light. So it's better than your digital camera. And another advantage of digital cameras is that there's no batteries required or power, which I think I've heard a lot of stories about, these craft, they could interrupt electronics or mess your batteries up. So I think if you have a camera that doesn't need any batteries, You could even have a film camera. If you got an old school crank camera, that doesn't need any batteries. I think that might help you as well. Another thing that is really necessary for pictures, for them to be valuable, because like I said, there's so many pictures up there and videos, and I feel like a lot of them are just not real. So I think what you really need is you need to have, you need to know the place, the time, and the time when the picture was taken. You need to have that. I need to know when was it taken and where was it taken. I need to know all the settings of the camera, you know, like all the specific adjustments you had. I want to know the type of camera. What is the model number of the camera? What type of lens did you have? And who took the pictures? Really, this is called metadata, information about information. So the information is the picture. The metadata is the information about the picture. So that's really what I need for the camera. But another problem is that UFO encounters are really brief. So that's very common. So if you see a UFO, it's only going to be there for like maybe a minute, and that's pushing it. 20 seconds, 30 seconds. That's another reason why it's hard to get a picture, because you have to fumble with your camera and take it out, and man, that'll be difficult. But there are some things we can do, although they're not very feasible. And one of them is we can attract UFOs. We could bait a UFO to come toward us. So in other words, instead of us going out there and hoping to see a UFO, we could get one to come toward us. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of reports that nuclear energy attracts UFOs. So if you have a nuclear engine, a nuclear power source, of course, that's very difficult. I mean, it's illegal and dangerous for you to personally have nuclear energy, but there are nuclear plants all over the world. I wonder if you were to, you know, stand at a legal distance from a nuclear power plant, you have a higher chance of photographing a UFO than just a random place. Perhaps that's a hotspot. You know, why are they attracted to nuclear energy? Well, that's a whole other can of worms. Popular thinking, people say, well, they're attracted to nuclear energy because it affects them. They don't like it. It affects other realities. Once again, there's not a lot of evidence to support that. So I'm not sure if that's true. But let me take a break and let me check the time. All right. Frapsap says, ectoplasm, not plasma. Well, I do think they're two different, well, okay, they're two different words, yes, but they could be the same thing. Like I said, plasma is a scientific concept. It is observable. It is, you could make it. You could just look at a neon light. You could look at the sun. It's got plasma. Ectoplasm I have heard about. That is like basically given off from if there's a seance going on. So everybody's in a dark room and somebody's like meditating. Then this silky substance will come out of their body. That is ectoplasm. And this substance is sensitive to light. So you have to have the room dark. But that ectoplasm can form a person. It could form an object like a trumpet. And then that trumpet, you could hear people talking out of it. Or if it could form an entire person, it could touch you, interact with you. If you want to know about this, you could look up on YouTube, look up Leslie Kean. And Leslie Kean talks about an experience she had with a seance. It happened very recently, and she basically describes everything I just said, which is pretty crazy. So thank you for that comment. When in doubt, put me in your mouth. I like that. Words to live by. I will use that. Fratsap, sometimes it's not about taking photographs for evidence. Sometimes it's important to just watch it go by with no proof. Thank you, Fratsap. Yeah, man, that's one of the realizations I came to when I did Black Lotus for a year and a half. You know, before that, I had an attitude that a lot of people have with the paranormal, which is basically, it's a very demanding attitude. Like, I need evidence. I want to see it. I want this. I want a picture. I want a body. I want a footprint. But, you know, through my experiences, you know, Fratsap, you're right. It's not always about that, demanding something from the paranormal. The paranormal, I believe, like I said, part of me thinks it is real. And if it's real, then it shares a planet with us. And, you know, just like other people, you know, sometimes it's good to just peacefully live with somebody or with animals, or even just to peacefully interact or share experiences with animals. So I guess what I'm saying is that I totally understand what you're saying. Sometimes with the paranormal, you don't have to try to get an ESP. You don't have to try to get strong evidence. Sometimes it's just about experiencing it, living with it peacefully, and learning what you can from it. I've been talking about UFOs, and I've just been trying to give explanations as to why they're not publicly accepted, basically. And that's the reason why. But that's a good point, Retzap. Okay, so continue going. I guess I'm going to keep going. I mean, if you guys think I should keep going, let me know. Type in if I should. I know I lost like 10 minutes, but I'm not even like halfway through done with my notes. If you guys have to leave, that's totally cool. At the end of this episode, I'll probably, when I post it, I'll probably repost it, cut out the first 10 minutes, and I will probably also put annotations so you guys can easily click through everything I'm saying. But yeah, let me know if you guys want me to continue going, or I could save it for another episode. But for now, I will continue going. So let's talk about where the UFO. Let's talk about UFOs, and let's talk about where the UFOs do the F. Where do the F at? The F in UFO stands for flying. So where are they effing? Where are they flying? So what I mean basically is I want to talk about the sky. We could go into a whole other conversation about USOs, underwater, unidentified submerged objects, which I think in a lot of cases they're exactly the same as a UFO. I think the true weird UFOs are probably transmedium, so they could go from space to our atmosphere to underwater. But for right now, let's just talk about UFOs and where do they live? Where are they seen? They're seen in the sky. So the first thing is, okay, Terry says she's going to have to catch up later. I understand it's kind of late on a Sunday. Thank you so much, Terry. Good night. Okay. Oh, here's another one. Before I get started talking about F. What do you think about my poem above? I call it A Dance with God, E.T. Oh, okay. I thought it was might have been a poem because it was very poetic sounding. I'll put it up again real fast. Let me read it again. I want to give it the time it deserves. All right, let's see. I believe this is the poem. Let me know if I am incorrect. You see everything. It all breaks down in front of you. The essence, the air itself. A complex design, pulled into the void, you gain momentum, locked forward, only slowing to see, only slowing to what seems a lone star. But yeah, it's very beautiful. I do like that poem. You see everything, it all breaks down, the essence of the air, a complex design. You know, like what I said earlier, I think what it makes me think about is just how much stuff is going on in our universe. I mean, the air is covered in, you know, the air in front of us is teeming with invisible things like pollen, insects, light waves, radio waves, sound waves, cosmic rays, and we don't really observe most of it. But in this poem, it seems like, you know, you're observing these things, and yeah. That's my interpretation. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely. Okay. So the first thing I'll talk about the sky is that, first of all, no one really knows where outer space begins and where airspace ends. So, you know, we all know that at some point, if you keep going up, you'll eventually hit space, right? But through my research, actually nobody can really define where that border is. We can get kind of close. And like I said, most UFOs that people see are observed in our atmosphere. Some of them are observed in space if you have a telescope. But that's the first point, is that we don't really know where this boundary is. However, broadly, most experts say the space starts at the point where the orbital dynamic forces become more important than the aerodynamic forces. or where the atmosphere alone is not enough to support a flying vessel at suborbital speeds. So basically, this definition is kind of technical. I have the link down below. I did not come up with this definition, but it's saying that space really starts where the atmosphere alone cannot support a flying vessel, basically. Here's some more definitions. So in the 1900s, there's a Hungarian physicist named Theodor von Kármán. He determined the boundary between, space and airspace to be about 50 miles up, roughly about 80 kilometers above sea level. And this is called the Kármán line. And it is what NOAA, I think that NOAA stands for the National Oceanic Aeronautic Association. I'm not sure. But NOAA calls the Kármán line an imaginary boundary. And they believe it's about 62 miles up. So here's our first definition of where space starts. It's about 62 miles up in the air, or about 100 kilometers above sea level. However, the Federal Aviation Administration and the U.S. Air Force and NASA, they generally say that that boundary is about 50 miles up. So basically 50 miles, that's a lot of environment for things to live. What I'm going to start talking about now is the possibility of some of these UFOs to be organisms, like living organisms that live in the sky. And so the first thing about living organisms is that, living things, what I've noticed about life is that they really don't let any space go to waste. So, the air in front of me right now, it's covered in bacteria. It's not because I'm dirty, it's just because life is everywhere. I mean, the air in front of you, unless you have a really good filter, is probably covered in pollen, bacteria, tiny flying insects. If you go to the road on the hottest day in the pavement and you scrape it, there's probably life there. So to me, this idea that the sky is so big, 62 miles up, all around the planet, the idea that there's nothing living there other than some birds and spiders and bacteria, that's kind of odd. I think things do live there. I think they're just really good at hiding from us. Perhaps they could camouflage from us. Let's see. All right, so then there's this guy named Jonathan McDowell. He's from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysicists, and he pulled publicly available orbital paths for 43,000 satellites and sorted them based on the lowest points in their orbits, called their perigee, during decommissioning and atmosphere reentry. So then from there, he realized that satellites could orbit the planet numerous times below an altitude of 62 miles. But those dipping below 50 miles meant a quick and flaming end more than often than not. So basically, it looks like satellites cannot go any lower than 50 miles. So 50 miles seems like a good mark for where the sky ends and outer space is. Okay. Now, our atmosphere has 6 different layers. And before I talk about those, let me read some of these comments. Here we go. The faster you move, the more it changes. Very cool. You pass recognizable geometry relatively fast, considering looking back, it all happened in a flash. Okay, very good. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of weird things happen when you travel fast, like time dilation, basically a form of time travel in which you travel into the future. You could watch Interstellar or Buzz Lightyear. They both talk about this concept of traveling very fast and things happening, like time dilation, weird things. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the atmosphere. So, I'm trying to get to this idea of like whether this is basically where UFOs live. So I want to, as a biologist, I want to understand where do they live? Because that could help me. I mean, as a scientist, I want to, if I'm studying an animal or an organism or some form of life, I want to understand its environment. That will help me understand the organism itself. So, okay. So our atmosphere above the ground, there's about 6 layers to it, okay? And I got this from NASA. The link is below. So the topmost layer The upper limit of the atmosphere is called the exosphere, and it's about, it goes all the way up to 6,200 miles. All right, so then right underneath the exosphere is the ionosphere. The ionosphere is below the exosphere, and it's an abundant layer of electrons and ionized atoms and molecules. It stretches about from 48 kilometers or 30 miles above the surface of the edge of space. It stretches from about 30 miles above the surface of the edge of space. Okay. And then we have the thermosphere, the mesosphere underneath that, the stratosphere underneath that, and then closest to Earth, which is the one I want to talk about right now, is the troposphere. Okay, so the troposphere is the closest layer of our atmosphere to humans. And if there were any living UFOs there or undiscovered biological animals that are from Earth, I do believe they would live in the troposphere. Yeah, that's where birds live when they're flying. When people are in planes, they're in the troposphere mostly. So the troposphere is about 5 to 9 miles up. And it is the most dense of all these layers. And from what I read on NPR, life lives about 3 miles above the planet. So although the troposphere is up to 9 miles high, life lives about 3 miles up high. But still, that's a lot of atmosphere. I mean, that's a lot of environment for something to live. So at any moment, the atmosphere contains an astonishing 37.5 million gallons of water, or it says million billion gallons of water. Not sure if that's a typo. Let's just say there's a shitload of water in our atmosphere, and it's in the invisible vapor phase. Why do I say this? Because one of the things that life needs for to sustain itself is water. I mean, there's some life that doesn't need water, abiotic life, but a lot of life does need it. And so you have water. You also have solar energy. We know that the sun is closer to us the higher we go. So you have water, you have space, abundant space, and you have solar energy. So I believe that those are conditions where things could live up there, like large jellyfish or amoebas. So I think some of these UFOs could be living things. So that kind of concludes the section about UFOs. I have a whole other section about abductions. So I'll probably save that for another day since we're already at about an hour. Yeah, including the dead time. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you for, I know it was a little rusty, but hopefully it'll get better. I'll answer any questions. There's some people in the room. Any last questions you want to ask? And then we will sign out and we'll do another episode. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, I think I read this one already. Well, I think that's it then, if there's no more comments. All right, well, thank you, everybody. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you learned something. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.